Hello and welcome everybody. For those who don't know me, my name is Anthony, functional nutritionist and master coach here at Fifth Element Wellness. Today we're going to dive a little bit into the mental side of things. We're going to touch on a concept called mental fitness. And we're really looking at how, in particular, how physical fitness can improve our ability to handle stress and our overall mental well-being. And so today we're going to touch on, we're going to get through three main points. Number one, what mental fitness is, a little bit of a definition to help us conceptualize it. Two, we want to look in particular into how our exercise or our physical practice can help us improve it. And then we're going to finish off with 4 steps to increase our stress tolerance. Right, so let's dive straight in. Have you guys heard of the concept of mental fitness before? If I can get a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Okay. All right, cool. So let's firstly, mental fitness is another way to think about fitness, and it really brings in the understanding of physical fitness and the concepts around that to help us better understand how we can become more mentally fit. So in physical fitness, we have a practice that we would do weekly to increase our strength, increase our endurance, relax, and that is to do more with our physical fitness. But our mental fitness can also be improved with similar attributes. So having a routine, having different exercise, different techniques, we can improve our mental fitness also. But before we do that, we want to get a couple of key metrics in order to, one, help us understand, but also help us get some measurement around where our mental fitness is sitting. So firstly, there's 5 main points when it comes to mental fitness. So the first aspect that helps us conceptualize this is our ability or self-awareness to recognize when and where we need support. That's number 1. Number 2, mental fitness is our ability to not only cope with stress, but also recover from it. Third, our ability to work through mental and emotional barriers. 4, our ability to adapt and to change to the needs of our stress levels or our environment. And also endurance, our ability or our grit to withstand or endure certain situations. So these are the five aspects that can help us define mental fitness and also measure it. So now what we were going to do is look at if these are the 5 things that help that define mental fitness and help us develop it. What I want to connect to just to give you a little bit of a backstory first, my physical practice, one of the main reasons why I started and to get into a physical practice, into strength training, into physical fitness, is because of the level of stress resilience and benefit that it had to my own mental health. And so that's what I want to connect today. I really wanted to connect how the physical practice that you're doing is not only contributing to your physical fitness, but your mental fitness. So let's dive into that a little bit more. Okay. All right. So firstly, the first component of mental fitness was having that level of self-awareness. Now, self-awareness is an important part of mental fitness because it allows us to be aware of our thoughts, feeling, and what's happening in our body, which in turn helps us recognize what we need. And when we understand what we need, we can better adapt to the situations that we're in. Now, self-awareness is done through a process in our nervous system called interoception. And interoception is our ability to sense and process understand what's happening within our bodies. So it's the feedback. Now, when we can't do this properly, when we can't sense what's happening for us in terms of understanding our stress levels, understanding how tight we are in our body, understanding our hunger, this, like our levels of if we need to eat or not, this diminishes our ability to be able to adapt to what we need or find what the aspects that can help us, leading to overwhelm and burnout. That inability, we might be in stressful situations where we might not notice our heart rate get elevated, our body temperature heat up, the feelings of overwhelm. And so we want to improve this process. Now, here at Fifth Element, we put a massive emphasis on movement quality, exercise technique, posture. So this allows us to get more out of our movements. It allows us to get more out of our exercise. It also helps reduce things like inflammation and injury. This big focus on not only just lifting heavy weights, but the quality of movement. And this process in itself is practicing this whole concept of interoception, the ability to sense our bodies and to build that mind-body connection. So a big thing in terms of the first step, in terms of how exercising is helping us build mental fitness, is through our increased connection from our mind and our body. And we do that through focusing on good exercise quality, good exercise technique. So that's the first part of building mental fitness, is building self-awareness through a big emphasis on exercise technique, movement quality, and building that mind-body connection. Other ways we can do this is through, other ways we can build self-awareness is through body scans, Qigong, Tai Chi, journaling, psychotherapy. These are methods outside of our training. So that's the first step of mental fitness, building self-awareness, and our exercise technique and quality can contribute to that. Just going to adjust that. So the next part here is the types of support. So not only do we need this self-awareness for mental fitness, but we also need to recognize when and where we need support. Now, sometimes it might be hard for us to admit or recognize when we need support. And that might be a pride thing. It also might be because we don't want to burden others. But I really want to change the thinking about that. And what I want us to think about is that it's not possible for us to do anything really without a level of support. That might be from your spouse, it might be from your friends, your workplace, but as humans, we really rely on our community and we rely on support. Even at a higher level, if you think about, whether it's performance from business or even athletes, they require a whole team of supporting factors to perform at the level they perform. This might be through different coaches, trainings, recovery specialists, medical team, friends, and family support. But it really requires this whole foundation of support to be able to perform at the level they perform. And what's interesting as well is sometimes in our daily lives, we have a high level of performance. It may not be the same output as an athlete, but we have business, we have families, we have all these different aspects that we need to show up and we need to bring our best selves and perform. Now, when stress is happening or something goes wrong, it's really interesting. I've read a really interesting article in sports psychology. And basically what it was all the different types of support an athlete needs when they have a setback, like an injury. And so I thought I'd integrate that into helping us understanding what are the different levels of support that are possible and what support is used at a higher level. Now, before we get into the different types of support, it's important to understand when we need support. This builds our mental fitness. So here we have this concept of eustress and de-stress. On the lower end of the scale, we have not being aroused or under aroused. So that's when we're bored, unstimulated, and we're not seeing much growth. But on the other end of that spectrum, we've got, fatigue, exhaustion, breaking down, and burnout. Now, our optimal level of performance is in this eustress category, where we feel energized, focused, where work feels like we can get into a flow and effortless. Now, the reason why I'm showing this is because this can help us identify when we need support. And basically, it's in two places. It's when it's on the lower end of the spectrum and the higher end of the spectrum. So I'll use the example more on the higher end because maybe we can relate to that a little bit more. So a really easy way to understand if we need support in a certain area is how's our energy levels? Are we waking up with energy in the morning, or are we feeling fatigue? Are we getting really exhausted by the end of the day? Do we find we start to get sick? Our health starts to break down. And are we feeling more anxious and burnt out? These are all signs that we need a higher level of support. Now, this can happen on the other end where we might feel like bored, unmotivated. That requires a different level of support because there's not enough stress there. There's not enough good stress or stimulation. So this is a really easy way to help us identify. And this, again, all these are taken from sports psychology and sports performance, but this is a really easy way to help us recognize when we need support. Now, this is an athlete's support system when they get injured or when they when they're going under a large amount of stress. Now, I found this so interesting because there's so much support here. So where the 5 areas are emotional support, so understanding feelings in terms of the athlete gets, reassurance, comfort that can come from family or friends, technical support. So this is basically what to do in their rehab, their rehab protocols, what's going to give them the best result. They've got informational support to help them, to help build motivation, help them stick to the plan that's drawn out, tangible support, and also motivational support to help them stay enthusiastic and accountable. Now, this is a lot of support. And now when we're thinking of our everyday life, we might have actually more pressure in terms of when everything's accumulated, but less support here. And so what I want, once in terms of, if we go back here, if we're feeling, if we're in that fatigue zone, if we're in that exhaustion zone, if we're in that burnout zone, we can recognize we need support. But the next thing we need to do is identify where. Is it more emotional support we need? Is it more technical support? Is it more informational support? Is it more motivation? Now, notice these support systems are also given, these might be familiar because here at Fifth Element Wellness, what we wanted to do, and we wanted to do this a while ago, is really change the way that we support people in terms of their fitness, the way they think about, the way they get supported. And you'll find, you may have found since being at Fifth Element Wellness, having a coach, that things have been easier on your health journey. And the reason for that is the level of support that is provided by your coach. And a lot of these different support systems that might have helped your fitness journey is because of these supports. So what my question is to you is, outside of your fitness and outside of your health regime, where do you feel stressed, overwhelmed, tired, and fatigued? And where may you need a little bit more support? All right. So we've covered how self-awareness is important. Recognizing when we need more support is important. The next thing is coping with stress. Now, one of the big benefits of cardiovascular training is our ability to train our nervous system. So when it comes to stress, it's really our ability to cope with it is the state of our autonomic nervous system, which is the balance of our parasympathetic and sympathetic response. So you can think of our sympathetic response as our fight or flight and our parasympathetic as our rest and digest. And it's important in terms of handling stress for these two systems to be in balance. Now, cardiovascular training trains the autonomic nervous system, and it's an amazing way to build our ability to cope with stress. And so I've just got a little bit of an extract here from a article. Aerobically trained individuals exhibit lower sympathetic nervous system, so that's your fight or flight, reactivity, and enhanced cardiovascular efficiency in response to physical and psychological stress. So training through endurance training, and what I mean by cardiovascular training is your more cardiovascular training. So it can be walking, jogging, elliptical, anything that's going to keep your heart rate elevated for a steady amount of time is going to start to train the autonomic nervous system to be able to cope with stress better. And so what we want to do here is we want to have moderate levels of intensity at zone 2 cardio for about 150 minutes a week to achieve those best results. And it's important that we don't push to our body in this to de-stress. So we don't want to overtrain. We don't want to overtrain the cardiovascular system or strength training or any type of training, because again, the same rule applies if I go back, the same rule applies here with your cardiovascular training. We want to stay in that optimal range, which is about that zone 2. That's where we're going to get those benefits of balancing out that fight or flight response and that relaxation response. And so this is a little bit of the benefits of what happens with the autonomic nervous system and how we cope with stress. So the less we move, and just a natural part of aging is our vagal response goes down. So that's a nerve that's really important for our rest and digest response. Our HRV levels go down. Our sympathetic response, our fight or flight, goes up, and our blood pressure increases. With cardiovascular activity helps us reverse all these factors. It increases our vagal response, our parasympathetic nervous system. It helps it increases our heart rate variability, which is an indication of overall health. It reduces our sympathetic response, and it also reduces our blood pressure. So we can see here now that the second piece of mental fitness, bringing in cardiovascular training, can really train our nervous system to better cope with stress. Now, there's other ways that we can cope with stress that are outside of this, but for today, I want to keep it really focused on how your physical practice is contributing to your mental fitness. Now, what we want to go through here is the recovery side. So we've gone through self-awareness. We've then, through self-awareness, recognized where we need support. From there, we're increasing our ability to cope with stress, and now we have to focus on recovery. So in terms of our recovery, I've got here yoga, sauna, and walking in nature for recovery. And so how I want us to think about recovery is, it's really easy to conceptualize recovery from physical stresses. So let's just say if we do a really hard session and we need to rest and recover, because what happens when we work out, we break down muscle tissue, it increase inflammation, and we can get some muscle weakness and fatigue. But this is not bad. This is actually required for us to make those positive adaptations in our strength, in our muscle tissue, to improve our body composition and our metabolic state, and to make us more fit. So this stress is required. But in order to optimize the results from this stressor, we need to plan your recovery. That's why you don't do back-to-back intense days. You need to have recovery days, whether that be walking, yoga, stretching, rolling. These things increase the level of recovery and also increase the adaptation response to that stressor. So my question to you is, when you have a psychological stressor or a mental stressor, what do you do for recovery after you've gone through that stress? And so, because if we plan it for our training, we also need to plan it for our mental state. And so if we have the awareness to recognize when we need to recover, my question is, it's not a matter of how much stress we have. it's a matter of how well we're recovering from it. So stress isn't inherently detrimental, as it helps us grow, adapt, and become fitter. My argument would be it's the lack of recovery that's causing us to go into burnout, into getting tired, fatigued, overwhelmed. And so what we want to do here is use our physical practices of recovery, and our self-awareness to understand if I have had a week of higher stress or bigger emotional output, how about we trade that intense exercise session, we swap it in for a yoga session, a sauna session, a walk outdoors in nature and greenery with a friend, talking with a friend. And so this will help us not only recover from physical stress, but it will also help us recover from mental, emotional stress, which in turn, again, that recovery factor is a key part in mental fitness. Now, we've covered the first 3 aspects of mental fitness, and I didn't want to make this too dense. So we're going to wrap up with the last slide, and then I can continue if people would like. I can do another session on the other aspects to it, but I just want to finish up with the 4 steps to increase our capacity to handle stress. And so number 1 is the ability to notice and name unhelpful thoughts. It's quite easy when we're in a situation under high stress that we can get hooked on thoughts that are not helpful, and these thoughts can perpetuate, that can change our perception and also increases our stress levels. So if we have the ability to notice and name those thoughts, we can get a bit of space from them in order for us then to choose a more grounded response. Number 2, realistic expectations of ourselves. This can be also from your workplace, from your family, but one thing that contributes to stress is unrealistic expectation. So we want to make sure we have realistic expectations, and we take in consideration things of how much time do we actually have? How much energy do we have in reserve? What's our health status at the moment? What's our level of experience and skills in order to do with what we want to do? Do we need time to actually build our skills and experience before we can be successful there? And do we have enough support in order to get that done? So quite simply, number 2 is having realistic expectation of ourselves and others. 3, the ability to accept the not so pleasant parts of our existence, and to understand that they're normal. So they're willing to make room for imperfection, for anxiety, for frustration, for failure, and hold all those uncomfortable thoughts. Now, when I was putting this presentation together, I felt a little bit hypocritical as I experienced all these things as I was going through. I was experiencing, I've got to give people heaps of information and it has to be perfect and all these things. So, I think it's just the normal part of, it's a normal part of being human. But if we can just have a level of awareness where I was like, okay, I'm doing this thing that I do again. Let me just accept that that's what I'm going to do. And that gives me a little bit of space from it. Lastly, number 4 is embracing values, connecting to what's important to us in the actual moment. Now, when we're stressed, we usually distance ourselves from how that situation might be benefiting us. You might have a management, an experience with an employee or a family member, and what that situation might be distancing you from what you think is important or beneficial to you. So connecting, asking ourselves, how is this situation meaningful to me? How can I align this to my values? How can I benefit from this? This really increases our capacity to tolerate more. So in terms of, just to recap that, we want to first, to increase our capacity to stress, we want to notice and name what's happening for us, our thoughts, our feelings, and our emotions. Secondly, we want to put realistic expectations, taking into consideration what's going on for us in our lives. 3, we want to make space for the imperfect stuff, the not so comfortable stuff, but the stuff that's normal for humans. 4, we want to connect things to what's important to us. So basically what we've that's the session for today. And what we've touched on is the 5 different aspects of mental fitness. We've touched on how exercise can help us build our mental fitness. And we've touched on 4 aspects that help us increase our capacity for stress. So hopefully, and the reason why I wanted to do this is because our mental well-being, we can't disconnect it from our physical health. It's such an important thing to think about when we're doing when we're involved in our physical practice. So hopefully you got some small nuggets out of that. Leave what didn't sit well. And I'm happy to just open the floor to not only questions around this, but just questions in general around managing stress or even your fitness journey.
I have a question, Anthony. I also just want to say I appreciate that honesty at the end. That was nice to know that we're not too dissimilar, that we do have the same problems.
Sorry, Vince, can you say that again, mate? Can you
I
repeat?
was just saying I appreciate the honesty about how you do struggle with some things that us mere mortals also struggle with. But the in one of your slides you talk about the 150 minutes of cardio.
Yep.
As far as that goes, what would you advise for in terms of the break of that through the week and the time of the day? I guess, and also, like back to back, like would you do like a Monday, Wednesday, or would you start the weekend of the week? And like how you would kind of break that up through the week, I guess.
All right. So there's different aspects, right? So there's a lifestyle aspect. So what's going to work well in your individual lifestyle. So I'll give you 2 things, Vince. I'll give you the perfect version of what I think is ideal and the reason why, but then also you need to just individualize it for you. So what I really like is this this concept of break the muscle down, provide blood flow, and then stretch it out. And so this is what I found this to be the optimal recovery, especially when we're in roles of high performance or that have high levels of output, right? So it won't always work out like this, but just hear me out. So the first part is we want to do our strength training, right? We want to work our capacity to build our strength, break our muscle down, and keep our bone density, our muscle mass optimal, right? So day 1, we've got strength training. Day 2, now we can work this aspect of not only building our capacity for stress by building our cardio capacity, but also we want to increase blood flow to our brain and our muscles, which then will help the recovery from our weight training session. So we've broken the muscle down. Now we want to bring some cardiovascular training in to pump blood flow and nutrients into the muscle. It's going to increase recovery. It's a different kind of training and energy system. So we're not going to burn out the body or do too much repetitive work. And so that would be day 2. Day 3, this is where I'll do something more like a yoga practice or a practice that's going to still elevate your heart rate, but to the point that it's going to clear cortisol from your system. So we don't want to go into that high intensity because that we need to release stress hormones in order to have a huge output and increase our intensity. So the reason why I love yoga and like a flowing yoga, because it increases our heart rate enough to clear stress hormones. But now that we've broken down the muscle, we've put blood flow into the area. Now yoga is going to give us that level of mobility, flexibility, but also increase our heart rate enough for us to clear stress. So then we just want to repeat that cycle. So we want to go break it down, put the blood flow in, and stretch it out. Now, so that's a little bit of an ideal point when it comes to how to structure training in a balanced way generally. But in terms of more cardiovascular training, I would break it up on the off day to your trainings. I'll do it 3 times a week. And I would aim for about 30 to 45 minutes where you're at. Now, if you're feeling up to it, I would put HIIT training into that as well. But I would taper that based on your stress levels of that week. Because HIIT training can be amazing, again, to increase your stress tolerance, but only if your system is not overloaded and overwhelmed. So if you get a good gauge and a really good gauge to understand if your capacity is up is obviously a really good metric is your HRV. So you can get wearables that really give you that understanding, morning readiness levels. Another simple way is just tracking your heart rate in the morning over time in bed when you wake up. If you get increases in that, you know your body's recovering. And if you go too low as well, your body can be over recovering. So understand a really simple way to gauge recovery is taking your heart rate in the morning, averaging it out, and then just seeing if you get an increase, your body's still recovering. If it's what it's usually at, you should be good to go for a higher intensity session. So usually what I'd like to do is, on a stressful week, we want to just keep it to zone 2 cardio 3 times a week on the off day. So you do like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Now, if you're having a good week, you can chuck in some HIIT training in order to build up your strength, your stress capacity, right? But you'll do that in small doses, and you wouldn't go over 20 minutes there. Vince, does that answer that?
That was perfect. That was nice and in depth. Exactly how I like it. Thanks.
Awesome. Has anyone got any questions? I'm conscious that I don't want to take too much of your time today. Got to get back to it. Great. Well, thank you so much for investing your time into your health and sharing your time with us today. Really appreciate it. And hopefully there was some small gems and some increased motivation when you're going to training to see how it benefits your stress tolerance. Have an amazing day, and I'll catch you guys in the gym.